Drawing in lithography is a little bit different than drawing in other media. First of all, our plates, if you remember correctly, are grease sensitive, which means I want to be careful about the grease on my hands getting onto the plate. So you'll see I'm using a protective paper to rest my hand on. I'm trying not to touch my plate. And we also have the crayons and pencils that work a little bit differently, partly because of the materials they're made of and partly because of how the plate is constructed itself. So remember, the lower number crayons are softer and draw a heavier, darker line, but because of the plate, they also grab a little bit more, and that material wants to be just pulled off of the pencil really easily. And the harder numbers or the higher numbers are harder, don't drag quite as much on the plate, but take longer to build up those dark values. And you'll see that as I'm drawing here. Notice as I draw that I'm going very slowly. It takes a long time to draw very rendered images on a lithographic plate because of that grab. Smooth tones are difficult to achieve unless you really take your time with them. And it's best to think about the surface of a ball grain plate as having a series of peaks and valleys, kind of points that come up. And those points, the peaks, really want to grab the crown. And when it grabs it from one direction. As you slide your crown across the surface, you're only sliding it across one side of that peak. So you'll see that when I'm building up tones here, I'm trying to go a lot of different directions, so I hit all sides of that peak. Now I'm going to show you some examples here. Boxing grandmas for one, and the big bird eating the guys for another. And I'll show you some various ones along the way. If you don't build up your tones slowly, then you'll end up with chunky marks in your blacks. And that can be a really interesting technique. But if you do it right, you can get nice smooth tones when you draw. So there are a lot of different ways to approach the drawing in lithography. Highly rendered images that have nice smooth tonal gradations, or images that have a more aggressive mark and maybe leave some of that chunky mark making in the plate. So I went through crayons, or the pencils 1 through 4 here. You'll see I'm using my dusting brush to kind of clean off my protective paper to sharpen my pencil a little bit as I'm going along. And I slowed it down here so that you could see just how long it really takes me to build up those tones. You'll see that the number 4 and number 5 that I'm using right now get me a wider tonal range, but I have to work a lot longer at getting that range here. So you'll see me go a lot of different directions, really attack that plate from a variety of directions. And I'm really going slowly, trying to use a light touch here so that those marks blend together. Now, because of the plate, we really have to kind of work that drawing a little bit more, which is not a problem. It's just something you have to plan for in the drawing process. Stones are similar. They have the peak and valley in them, but they don't grab quite as much as an aluminum plate does. So they're a little bit nicer surface to work on. And I've been sharpening my pencils as I go along here, and you'll see me sharpen them as I continue to go along, because if I have a dull tip on that pencil, I can't reach down into those valleys in between the peaks. And that's why you have to build up darks on a lithographic plate. If you get too much chunky material on one side of that peak, you're going to have a hard time dipping down into the valley to fill in the areas that you want to have solid blacks in. So building it up is better than just chunking it on and trying to get out the white spots that are going to result as part of that. So in the images that I'm showing you, look for really rendered, drawn, nice smooth tones against those chunky tones, and think about how those may have been drawn differently. And I'll put up some more images here in a second. So lights, you have to draw really delicately, and you may still see some of that mark making. That's where some of the other drawing materials, like the rubbing ink, comes into play to get rid of some of those, or being very careful. Now in lithography, we always draw in black so that we can see better what we're drawing. We don't draw with color, and I'm not quite sure where the precedence for that came in, But the nice thing about that is you don't have to think in just one color. We can always change the color of our inks, but we want to make sure that we're drawing dark enough to correctly translate into colored inks. Now, when we start out, we'll be doing just black and white prints, so what we see should be what we get when we print. Although you'll notice that when I write on my plate, I'm writing backwards, because when we print off of our plates, everything's going to come off in reverse for the process we're using right now. So you want to make sure if you're doing any writing on your plate that you do that in reverse, and when you're drawing, remember the image will be reversed, so you want to account for that. Now here I'm switching over to the Stones pencils, and one thing that I didn't mention to you before is the main difference between a Corns pencil and a Stones pencil is that the Stones pencils are not water soluble, where the Corns pencils are. So here you can see a highly rendered image, and then that image put into color in the print. And that, again, another rendered image. The difference between those two pencils frees me up to use different processes. I could do a wash, say, over a Stones pencil and not have that pencil mark dissolve. Where if I did a wash over a Corns pencil, a water wash, that water could dissolve the pencil line and blur it. So I want to be careful about some of those things and the way the materials are working. But that difference between Corns and Stones can be really valuable to us as we draw. Otherwise, the main difference is Stones you have to use a holder to draw with, and they come in different varieties, I guess. So here I'm just trying out some different things. I'm not going to do all my pencils, but you'll see me also, this is the tablet that we talked about earlier, and you can see much more easily how this is going to chunk up over the surface and respond to the surfaces that are underneath it as well. So here, if I'm just really rubbing in that tablet, I'm not getting a solid black because I'm only going one direction and I'm trying to do it too fast. Although if I use a softer one as I do here, I'll get it closer, but you'll still see those white spots in the drawing, which can get really annoying if you're trying to get that solid black. So build up those surfaces, pay attention, and even though with a tablet you're not going to get it perfectly flat, that's what rubbing ink, which I'm using here, is for. And you can draw directly with rubbing ink. It's really greasy, so you want to be careful with that. Or you can use it as it's meant to be used, which is to rub on and get that really soft, delicate tone. And again, you'll have to build this up slowly to get what you want. And I'm not pushing down really hard with my finger either. Now here you can see an example of an image that uses a variety of techniques to build up that image in there. Pencil drawing, tablets, maybe some washes thrown in, quickly drawn lines and lines that have been built up slowly to get different tonalities in there. And here drawing with the crayon, again, the nice thing with the crayon is you can use them any way that you want. You can use the flat surface, you can use them as you do the pencil and shape them into the shapes that you want. They come in the different hardnesses, the same as the pencils, so you have a variety there to work with as well. But you can really form those into the shape that you need, and a different way than we think about sharpening the pencils. You can get a blunt tip, you can get a sharp tip, whatever you want on that. So again, remember to think in color even though you're drawing in black and white. Now here, that kind of sums up the drawing materials. Here's tusche, and to use the tusche, we have to get it in a solution with water. So I have to start by making that solution, or mixing my tusche. And you can mix tusche with water or with solvents. We're going to stick with water on aluminum plates, because solvent on plate gets a little out of control. And I just pour a small amount of water, maybe a quarter or a half of an ounce, into the can, and I'm going to stir it up with my brush, going in nice circular motions, trying to cover the whole surface of the tusche in there so I don't wear like an outer ring around it. Some people just go around the outside and you end up with a bare can on the outside and a bunch of tusche left in the middle. So just try and cover that surface evenly. And I like to use a soft brush for this, but some people use a stiff one to stir up the tusche quicker. And I'm going to keep stirring up my tuche until I get a pretty pasty mixture, I guess. It won't go completely pasty, but I want it to be a rich, rich black. What I'm doing right now is making 100% black that I'll then thin down to the tones that I want. So this is my main mixture, and I'll decant that into other containers and add water to it to thin it down. So I'm going for 100% black right now. So I'll try that on scraps of paper and keep mixing until I get it thick enough and black enough to work with there. And this can take a while depending on your can. One thing you don't want to do is mix cans that you're using for solvent wash and that you're using for water washes. Water washes should stay water washes. Solvent tuche cans should stay solvent, and you definitely can't go from solvent back to water. You can convert a water can into a solvent can, but not vice versa. Once the solvent's in there, it does different things to the tuche, and you don't want to put that back into a water solution. So I'm going to keep stirring, keep mixing, and keep testing until I get that solid black. You can see my second test was much darker. I'm going to keep going a little bit more here until I'm happy with the results. I'm just trying this on a normal sheet of paper, but in a second here I'm going to switch to a good piece of rag paper that I have. So that looks pretty good. I have it pretty black. I'll stir a little bit more, just get a little bit more pigment out of that. Now tuche is made of similar materials to the crayons, but because it's going in a water solution, we can use it to get reticulation. Now that's about perfect right there. So I'll try it out on a scrap of rag paper and just make sure that it looks okay. The papers soak up things a little bit differently. But first I'm going to strain my tuche. Now some people don't strain their tuche. If you don't strain your tuche, you can get thicker particles, bigger particles of tuche in there, which can be used if you like that effect. I like to strain mine and get really nice, clean reticulation and blush out of it, a tone that comes up in the tuche. So I just fold up a cheesecloth a number of times, maybe 4 to 8, and I'm going to pour my tuche from the can, that solution I'm making, through the cheesecloth into another container. And then I'm going to do that again here. I forgot another container to put it into, so I'll have to go grab one. I'm going to strain that again through the same cheesecloth into another container. Do that maybe 2 to 3 times, and that will get out the larger particles that are in that tuche mixture and make it a really fine mixture, so that when we go to paint it on, it won't have any larger chunks. They'll all be really nice and similar. So here I'm just going to strain it into another container, get rid of some of those larger chunks again. And technically at this point I should strain it into either a new container or go rinse my old one out. I'm just going to put it right back in at this point, which is, kind of defeating the purpose a little bit. So 3 strains really gets you a nice tuche. And then I'm going to go ahead and add some water into this and get my solution down to the right tone that I want. I could draw with pure black, which is what I have in the other container there, and get a really dark tuche out of it. But if I want to get any of the reticulation and tonalities that tuche is really good for, then I'll want to thin it down and get the right tone that I'm looking for out of that, the right value. So that's a good example of a light tuche wash. I'll add a little bit more of my solution, get a little bit darker, good medium tuche wash there. If I add a little bit more to it, then I can get myself up to a nice dark tuche. And I can use all of those. I can have different solutions going all at the same time and painting with all of them onto the plate. So if I go back to my plate here, I'm just going to paint on some of that tuche. And again, I think I'm going to speed this up because this could take a while if I don't. Tuche will take a long time to dry. Aluminum plates aren't absorbent like stones are. They hold water on the surface because of the tooth but aluminum as a metal doesn't absorb any of that material. So I want to give it a long time to dry out. I'm going to speed things up, and it takes this plate, when I'm done drawing here, about 45 minutes to dry. And then I just got bored with it and ended up going at it with a hairdryer, which is not the best way. Now, something else I can do here, I'm painting on my plate with tapum or gum arabic, just really thin layers, and I can use this as a stop out for drawing on top of. So if I know I have areas that I want to remain pure white, then I can gum out those areas with the tapum or with gum arabic, paint it on very thinly. You don't want it thick or bubbly or anything. Another example, sorry. And I'll just wait, one more is coming up here, of different ways to draw, combining those crayon materials and wash materials. And again, being able to think in color. So if I stop out areas of my plate, then I know that those areas will come up pure white. Now, gum arabic and tapum is water soluble, so I can only draw on top of these really with crayon or pencil or a solvent touche, but water touche will just dissolve that gum arabic and won't do me any good. So you want to watch out for that. And I may have cut over it, but also getting your pencil wet and drawing with that wet pencil will make a solid black mark. It will go down really easy, and it will almost always fill in completely black. But that's something that you can use. I used it down at the bottom of that wash to get those squiggly lines kind of going around in there. So this is the watching touche dry section of the video here. And again, this took about 45 minutes, and right now I think I'm using the hair dryer on it, and it's going a little faster. The hair dryer is kind of a cheat because I'm also moving my touche and not getting as clean of reticulation out of it. So you want to watch out for that. Air drying is usually the best, maybe putting a fan slightly away from the plate. And I'll show you a little bit of reticulation here in just 1 second as I give you some close-ups. But remember to draw carefully. If you're going to go into color, draw dark enough for that color. Remember, going into a white, it's already lost most of the value of that drawing, and you want to go back and make sure you have a full 100% white, which means a full 100% black when you're drawing. And here are just some examples of the up-close drawing, the touche and the crayon.